Good morning, everyone. My name is Giles Ostermeyer, and I'll be taking you through the rest of this webinar. We're going to be covering three key points. First is basic logging, second is advanced features, and the third is data transfer. And this should take about 20 to 25 minutes. So first, a quick overview of LogChief. LogChief 3 is Maxwell's new data capture application, and it allows you to collect data in exactly the same format that will be stored into the database. It then allows you to synchronize directly into your database so that you can transfer your data quickly and securely. The logging is designed to prevent any loss of data during the transfer and to make the process of capturing and managing your data as easy as possible. What you see in front of you at the moment is the LogChief main screen. From here you can select your configurations, your profiles, and log any of your data. What I'm going to be showing you today is basically an out-of-the-box model with some slight variations. I've added some QC policies, for example. What we have here is a tree structure layout. So we've got our workflows on the left, and then when we select our workflows, we then have our profiles associated with them. So if I select my drilling workflow, I've now got 3 profiles in that workflow. I can show you the other workflows have some profiles in them as well. I can then select my diamond drilling profile, and we've got our logging groups. And this is meant to be a kind of instinctive grouping of logging your data. If I go into my logging view itself, I'll enter the color view. We can see that it's in a grid format. This logging view is fully customizable, and the user can shift, drop, add any of the columns in their profile. I can show you simply, if for example I wanted my original east before my original north, I could simply pick it up, drag it, and drop it before. If I wanted to remove it entirely, I could drag it. And if I wanted to put it back, I would right-click, column chooser, and just put it back. Simple as that. Logging in this grid view is designed to be familiar, easy to understand, and in this sense it should be relatively instinctive. You can also create a custom format and log into a form type layout. So I've created a custom format for this profile. If I select this button up here for use custom layout, I'll show you this is my custom format. And I can enter my data in here. I think that this layout is usually pretty good for storing a lot of fields in one screen, and also for the touchscreen functionality if you've got that on a tablet, for example. So if I'm just going to go back to my grid layout, and I'm going to stick with the grid layout for now. So we're going to start logging. We have to create a new hole first. I can show you the other groups which are available in this drop down here. But if you haven't logged a hole, you have this please log a caller, and you can't actually input any data. So first I'm going to go in and start logging. It's as simple as clicking in the box, entering your hole ID, MGH010, for example, and I'll give it a max depth, 20 meters, and enter. You'll notice that some of the fields were automatically populated. This is set up in the logging profile, and it all depends entirely on what you're logging. So for example, I'm logging in my diamond drill hole profile, so my hole type is automatically populated with DDH for diamond drill hole. You can also enter multiple records, so if I select my multiple rows up here, my prefix is automatically given because I've already assigned a value. My suffix start, and I'll put a suffix end 18, and I'll hit create. There we go. It's just created a whole bunch of holes for me. I can copy and paste within LogChief. I can either copy an entire row by selecting the row and clicking this copy record, or I can copy individual cells by either hitting Control C or the copy cell down here. So I'll hit the copy. I'll just highlight the other cells, and then I can hit either Control V or paste my cells. You can also copy in from third-party applications such as Excel. So if you've got a whole lot of data in Excel that you want to bring over into LogChief, you can simply just copy and paste that in. We've got our survey and metadata tabs up here, so if you have that kind of information, then you put that in, and then you can progress onto logging your downhole data. You'll notice that some of the columns are highlighted in red. These are mandatory fields that are required by the database, and the red just helps identify which fields must be filled in. If you don't fill these fields in, then it won't let you save the hole or that row. I've entered my hole ID. I'll now go down to my downhole geology, and I can start logging. We've also set up some fields that are linked to library tables, and these appear as drop-down boxes. So if I just log to 5 meters, I select in my drop-down box, and I have all of my library fields in here. You can see at the moment I've got code and description, but if I'm very familiar with the code and I don't want description because it's taking up too much space, I can simply do column chooser and drag out the description, or I can put it back in. You know, really whatever you want. And this is good for first-time loggers who are not familiar with any of the codes. So I'll choose tough. I'll give it a texture, and I'll enter my row. And really, logging is pretty much as simple as that. So once we've finished logging our hole, we can then move on to logging our samples. If I go down to my DH samples group, logging samples is very similar to how you log your hole. You have a sample ID, and you can also create multiple rows. So I can just enter my sample as MGS 001, meter from 0, meter to 1, select my sample type, and enter the value. I've set up a QC policy in this profile by which every 10th sample is assigned as a blank. So if I go ahead and create multiple, I'll start at 2. I will bring it down to a depth of 25 meters with a depth increment of 1. Select the sample type and sample category. I hit create, and you'll notice that it goes from 1 to 27 instead of 1 to 25. And this is because 2 of the samples have been removed and they've been assigned as blanks. So if I select my standard samples table, we'll see that those 2 samples are now in the standard samples table. And that's been completely automated. I can also do this manually. If I enter all my samples, I can right-click in this left-hand column. I can either select standard or duplicate. I'm going to select duplicate here. So sample 12, I'm going to make a duplicate of sample 11. Hit OK. You'll notice that all of the M from and M2s have been automatically corrected. And if I go to my sample QC, my sample 12 is now the original sample 11, and the category is duplicate. And the meters from and meters to have been changed to match that of sample 11. So 9 till 10, if we check sample 11, it's also 9 till 10. Logging your surface samples is very similar. What I forgot to mention is that you can choose your hole by selecting from this drop-down box up here. So I can select any of my holes here. And I can also select my data sets. I've filtered the data set so that it's only showing LogChief. Back to surface samples. I've got a separate profile for my surface samples. If I select that, surface samples are very similar to creating your hole IDs again, except that you don't have a reference hole. You've got a coordinate system for them. So if I just show you that, I've got my sample ID, my sample type, and then my coordinates, so my grid, my north, my east, my RL. Creating your QCs and your standards are exactly the same as what you would do for your downhole samples. So that basically covers the basic logging aspect of LogChief. We can now go into some more of the advanced features. So LogChief supports hierarchical logging and also visual logging checks. The hierarchical logging is set up in the backend database by connecting library tables together with foreign keys. We've got one set up in our diamond drilling profile. If I go into my color info, under metadata, you notice that two of the columns are blue and green, and these two are connected in hierarchy. The green columns are higher dependency. In other words, the green column is dependent on the value in the blue column. So I can simply give my meter from my meters to. I can then click this drop down, and you'll see that the first values that you see are actually belonging to the drilling contractor. Select my drilling contractor, and then the next values are the rig. So once I select my rig 14, it automatically populates both those cells. You can do this either way. You can go through either the rig column, or you can also go through the drilling contractor column. And you can set this up on essentially any columns that you want. You can link more than two columns together, so you can have 3, 4, 5 columns in a hierarchy. Again, the more columns you have, the more complex it'll become. We've also got cell formatting, and this I've produced in my profile. If I go down to my downhole geotext and I add a value, I've got a calculation rule on interval length, recovery percentage, and fractures per meter. So at the moment, if I enter my recovery as 0.8, my number of fractures as 45, and I enter that, you'll notice that the interval length has been automatically calculated from the from and to. The recovery percentage has been calculated from the recovery meter and the interval length. And the fracture frequency has been calculated based on these values as well. So if I enter a couple of records, I'll go down to 10, and I'll just place some values in. You'll notice here that I've got a line chart going, and that is something that you can select. You can create line charts, bar charts. You can put images in here, patterns, and that's selected through going down into the properties. I right-clicked on the column header. I go down to properties, and I can select line, bar, really anything, and it'll create this for me. If I go back to text, you'll notice that they've been assigned colors, and these colors are from the visual cell formatting, which essentially formats the cell color based on the cell value. I've set it so that anything over 97 is green, anything under 90 is red, and I can show you, this is where you enable and disable them through this button here. I can show you the rules I've created. So if I hover over the value, it'll tell me the expression. Geotech recovery percentage is greater than 97, and therefore it's given it a green value. And this is just a nice way of highlighting areas of interest or pointing out possibly erroneous values. So in this case, you might say a recovery percentage of over 97% is excellent, and under 90% is, well, not acceptable. So if we see that this recovery percentage is under 90%, that's indicating that there's something wrong with the recovery here. So now that we've logged some data, we can close the view. We can now transfer it back into the database. Now there's two ways that you can do this. If you have a network connection, you can synchronize the data directly into the database. And if you don't have a network connection, then you can create an export of your data, which essentially produces a file containing all of your data, which you can then transport to your office, either by email or USB, and then upload it into the database from there. Now, these two buttons up here are for the synchronize. It's the basic synchronize, which synchronizes everything, and the advanced synchronize, where you can select individual holes, individual samples. You can create filters in order to basically select which data you want to synchronize back in. The export functions are these two buttons up here. And again, on the left-hand side is the basic export, which exports all of your data. And on the right-hand side is your more advanced export, where you can select by hole ID, by color ID, by sample ID. So I'll show you, first of all, the simple synchronize. When I click on that, it gives me an error, and that error is actually telling me that my sample depth is greater than the maximum depth of my hole. So if you recall, I gave my hole 20 meters, but my sample depth went down to 25 meters. So if I take a look, I've been putting my samples into hole MGH11. If I go back into my colors, I can change MGH11 so that it goes down to 25 meters. I can then make sure, well, it's 24 meters, but 25 meters either way. And then I can hit synchronize again. And now the synchronization is complete because it satisfies all the constraints that are in your database. The other option is the export. And what we have here is an export that produces a file type. We support multiple file types. So if I show you the different file types, we have Excel, Access, CSV, and XML. You select your file type. You give it a file path. You hit Next. And then in the next window, you hit Export. And it basically just produces a file which you can import into another LogChief. You can use with third-party applications, so ArcGIS, for example, or you can import it, you can transport it to your office and import it into your database from there if you don't have a connection. That's basically what we're covering today. So to recap, we've looked at logging your data, some of the more advanced features, and then transferring the data back into the main database.